Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm smiling. Why am I smiling? It's legislative session time in Santa Fe. Is that a time to be smiling? Well, I am. Anyway, Happy New Year still to you and your loved ones. We have hope. We have a session going on in Santa Fe, will be going on. And we have Paul Gessing, the president of the Rio Grande Foundation, here to share his wisdom about all this money that we pay as taxpayers, mainly the oil and gas industry. All this money, our big budget, $800, $900 million of new taxes going into the state coffers, yet we're still the poorest state in the nation? Why? How does that work? Paul will tell us how right after this. Stay with us. Of course, we all know April 15th is the time that we have to get our taxes in. And I recall Governor Johnson said people, well, I worked for him years ago now, would say if everybody had to pay their actual taxes on April 15th, they paid it all at once instead of having the government take it out of your paychecks, they would really think about how much they're paying in taxes and maybe rethink of how those taxes should be spent. Paul Gessing, Rio Grande Foundation, thank you. What do you think of that? If we all paid on that date, we'd just realize, my God, a big part of our check is going to government.
Well, I don't want to take you down a rabbit hole here, but the idea of income tax withholding was developed during World War II in order to help pay for that war, which was, of course, a global and national crisis situation. The money was needed immediately.
Couldn't wait till April 15th, okay.
Yeah. And so they instituted withholding. They based it on Macy's, the department store, and the way they did their charge cards and allowed people to pay off their big ticket purchases from, say, the holidays, which maybe people are paying right now over several months, and they noticed that people bought more stuff when they could pay it off over time. None other than Milton Friedman, the great Nobel Prize winning free market economist, one of my personal heroes, was involved working for the U.S. Treasury at the time. And so withholding an idea so good that we need to get rid of it now.
We need to get rid of it.
I agree
now
with Gary about that.
Yeah, spend it. We've just realized, actually, people who start their first jobs are so shocked. Oh, we're paying this much an hour. I worked 20 hours. My check should be this. But they say, who is Mr. FICA?
Who is that FICA guy? Yes.
Tell me about that.
A famous episode of Friends, the TV show that was on in the 90s. Jennifer Aniston and her character, she gets a job and she says, who is this FICA guy and why is he taking all of my money? And people are shocked when they start paying actual taxes. I was a golf caddy. That was my first job, and we're in a loophole, so I got paid cash on the barrel. It was a shock the first time I took home a real paycheck, and suddenly I was wondering who that FICA guy was and why he's taking all my money.
It's the federal government taking our money, state government is taking our money, and we're supposed to be receiving things back from that. Mm-hmm. But about 900 million new tax dollars are going to the state in 2026, which is just around the corner.
The fiscal year,
yes. Fiscal year. Mm-hmm. Our budget, our state government budget's about over $10 billion just in tax dollars that we spend here, not taking into account all the federal money. How much is it with the federal dollars, our budget?
It approaches $30 billion
for our little state of 2 million people.
Yeah.
2 million people. But with all this money, largely due to the oil and gas industry, why, Paul Gessing, are we still such a poor state with poor standards in education and crime and every bad list? We're at the top.
Well, I am sorry to do this, but I'm going to throw some numbers out here. You've already thrown a few out. The first is that that $900 million surplus, that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, and what oil and gas does for New Mexico. The other taxes they pay are total $13.6 billion, and that's for fiscal year 2026.
What's the number?
They pay to the state of New Mexico a grand total of $13.6 billion with a B dollars. That's an annual number, I believe, the previous fiscal year, 2025. So fiscal years, just so your listeners and viewers know, a fiscal year at the state of New Mexico lasts from July 1st to June 30th. So right now, as we talk about this, we are in fiscal year 2025, and the new fiscal year will start on July 1st.
Yeah, we're just celebrating the new year and we're already into 2026.
Yes.
Jeez.
So the legislature will be passing a budget for fiscal year 2026 in the 2025 legislative session. I know it gets very confusing. And that budget will likely be an increase over the $10.5, $10.3 billion that we have already.
So if our budget is let's say $5 billion, and we have this surplus above and beyond, because we got to pay that 10.5 to continue the same old programs if we're going to continue the same old programs. But there's actually now $900 million new dollars to tack on top of that.
Right.
But you said the oil and gas gives the state
13.6.
So where does that go?
Well, a lot of it goes into these savings accounts, so-called.
But half of it goes to the 10.5 billion, right? Half of our budget comes from the oil and gas, about.
Yes, that's about right. And in the gross receipts tax, the income tax, all the taxes that we pay, some of that's indirectly oil and gas money. But the reason we don't not pay tax, or we have a tax burden, is because a lot of this money is being shunted aside into these future accounts. Now, this has been done for decades, but the oil and gas industry hasn't boomed like it has in recent years. It didn't boom up until 2011, 2012, and it really started to get moving in a positive direction. And we have this production-driven boom in New Mexico.
Okay. So this 13.6 billion, part of it goes to the operating of government, but part of it goes to the permanent
So
funds.
New Mexico's sitting on $57 billion in land grants and other permanent funds.
Wow.
Now, the philosophical underpinning of that was someday oil and gas will go away, and what do we do then?
Because as an extractive industry, it's taking things out of our earth, out of our ground here in New Mexico, and we're reliant on that money, but when we've taken that last drop of oil out, we still have this big budget to pay, so we put these in the permanent funds to basically use the interest.
That's the idea. Now, money spins off every single year from those accounts. In fact, by 2039, so 15 years, 14 years from now, policy analysts are saying that New Mexico's primary source, its biggest source of revenue, will not be oil and gas as it is now, but will be money invested on that oil and gas that comes back to the state. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally,
it sounds good. It sounds good.
It sounds great, but unless our taxes are lowered, unless the people of New Mexico get some benefit directly from that, not some government program, I'm talking about money in our pockets, tax reductions, tax cuts, economic diversification, that's the way, in fact, we should be preparing for some future day, whenever that may be, when we don't have oil and gas anymore. Because a lot of people back in the 70s thought, oh, we're going to run out of oil and gas in the near future, like years from then. So 70s, 80s.
We would have already run out of it by now.
Long time ago.
If we would have done these different processes.
New technology came along, and now we're producing 7 or 8 times what we produced even in the early 2000s, let alone back in the 70s and 80s. So that means more money for us, but it doesn't mean more money for the taxpayers, for the people of New Mexico. It means more money for government, more money that they've piled up in these funds. It's not just the permanent funds. In addition to that $57 billion, we have $6 billion in unspent capital outlay money just sitting around. We have pots of money all over New Mexico, largely from the oil and gas industry, that sometimes it just seems like people forget about it and they don't even know what's there.
So I started the program, Paul Gessing. So why we have all this money,
right,
largely due to oil and gas. You know, fortunately we have it in the eastern part of the state. We've got it. Why are we so poor?
Well, partially because government grows and takes more resources. New Mexico, since this boom, especially under the current governor, has seen the fastest growth in spending by the government of any state in the country, and that makes that, that money is used for government, not individuals being empowered to use that money for their own best purposes. So I don't think many of those government programs are very effective. We've seen that time and time again, the failure of government programs. And then secondly, the state is putting that money aside. So they'll invest it even overseas. One of the recent investments that the State Investment Council made was New Mexico oil and gas money in the permanent fund being invested in Danish, Denmark-based clean energy fund. It's like, no, we need that money here in New Mexicans' pockets. Well, invested, if the government's going to invest it, it should invest it in businesses and industries that support New Mexico. Now, the governor believes that is one thing and one thing only, which is so-called green energy. Maxion, a solar panel manufacturer. Ebon, another solar panel manufacturer. So one of the things that she's done is take oil and gas money and so-called invest it in green energy sources. We're spending money on the film industry. So money gets siphoned off and then put into the permanent funds. And so we don't have the financial wherewithal in our state to actually build our own wealth and our own resources because the government's taking so much of the money that the oil and gas industry is generating. Yeah, if I was in charge, it would look a lot different. I don't think any of this is going to change, by the way, in the legislative session. There is money available for tax reduction. We have the 60-day session this year, so it's wide open. A lot can happen. We have new money, as you mentioned at the outset. Will there be tax reduction? I don't know.
And we're talking about income tax, sales tax. What kind of taxes are you talking about?
The gross receipts tax is the likely one. Not reform like I want, to make it look a lot more like a sales tax. And that's a long story, but basically involves the gross receipts tax becomes very unfriendly to small businesses. It pyramids, you pay taxes on taxes. I would love to see it shifted to a straight sales tax. A sales tax is just at the point of sale, just what it says. It's a percentage of whatever the sale is. Gross receipts tax has a lot of economic harms that make New Mexico unfriendly to business.
Is there any appetite, since we have so much money, and when I worked in the legislature, they say, oh, we can't really do reform. We're not sure how it's going to work. Now, Paul Gessing, we have all this money. What is their excuse not to do reform? Because in the past, they said we can't do tax reform. It's too risky. There's no risk. We've got money.
There is no excuse because they don't talk about it in the same way. You're talking about the good old days when New Mexico was a little more ideologically diverse. Now we are a progressive, left-wing dominated state. We're not just Democrat, we're progressive, very left-wing. And so there's not the kind of discussion and debates that really go on or that went on even 10, 20 years ago because they're not called on the carpet in any substantive way. There's no real plan to say, here is what we need to do. I mean, you get a bill and then it just dies. And there's never the media doesn't question, hey, we have all this oil and gas money. Why aren't we returning some of it to the citizens of our state? That it just, you don't see the news articles about that. I've read numerous AP articles, and I'm not just throwing them under the bus, but the TV stations, it should be on the nightly news every single day. How is the state of New Mexico the poorest state in the country while we have more money than any other state, certainly as a percentage of our population? The number one energy state is Texas. They have more oil and gas than we do, but they have 16 some odd times the population that we do.
We've got 2 million people.
We have 2 million people.
This has been that way for generations.
This money should be returned to we the people. And there may be room for, say, a gross receipts tax rate reduction. That would be nice. I don't know how big it would be. I don't know if there would be offsetting tax increases because the legislature, while I yell till I'm blue in the face, cut taxes, they say, okay, we'll cut this tax, but we're going to raise this other tax or these other taxes.
Or these fees that are really taxes.
Right, so we don't get a lot of clean tax reform bills passed through the tax committee.
So there isn't even the discussion of reform, because I recall the discussion, but the excuse was,
Yeah.
I mean, they even did a study, remember, with Senator Scher, who is now the president, the Republican leader.
Yeah.
He had a 2%, everybody pay sales tax,
Yep.
2% across the board, not a flat tax, but just 2%. They even studied it. I think the study was $80,000. They studied that it could work. They had UNM study it, paid our tax dollars to study it. Never heard anything after they studied it.
Yeah.
Just to appease him. They studied it. It will work. So they always discuss tax reform. And that when we speak of tax reform, that means, you know, some people, some businesses pay more taxes and have more fees than others. Some are more favored. Some of them, like the solar panel businesses, get government subsidies. Others don't. I mean, it's big government or government picking and choosing the winners and losers. And if you're
Yeah.
not in their favor, you're a loser and you're going to be taxed harder than who they favor. So the reform would make it more equitable.
Yeah.
Isn't that fair? Equitable?
Oh, it is fair.
But there's
Absolutely.
discussion, we couldn't do it because we don't have money. We've got money.
Right. Well, here I am trying to educate the people of New Mexico about this issue so that in the future, when they go to the polls and vote for candidates for the legislature and governor, that they at least understand what is being talked about and what issues are at stake. I mean, when Michelle Lujan Grisham ran for re-election, she didn't mention any economic policy issues. She basically ran on abortion, and that was it. So, I mean, there are, whatever side of the abortion issue you're on, that is an important issue, but there's all kinds of issues involving the budget, education, our poor ranking on education, crime. The governor called a special session during the summer last year, and her own party said, no, we don't want to address crime issues in the legislative session. Will crime be a big issue? Will the crime bills be effective? Because my opinion of the crime issue is that primarily it's a Bernalillo County, city of Albuquerque problem.
Well, it's kind of grown into Santa Fe.
There's
too.
crime across the state, and that's another progressive city, just like the city of Albuquerque. But the police, do they have the ability and the incentive to actually deal with the criminal element? Will they go to jail? Will the judges keep them in jail? Will the DOJ, the Department of Justice at the federal level, will the requirements that they've been forcing on the city of Albuquerque change? Perhaps the Trump administration could come in and say, all right, we're done meddling in policing issues in the city of Albuquerque and other cities. We're going to allow them to enforce their laws. There are all kinds of ways that this could all play out.
What do you think are the big issues facing this now we're in the legislature? What are the big
Well, it should be what we just discussed, economics.
It should be, but you just
should
said
be. It should be.
They hadn't discussed it.
Well, in terms of, unfortunately, what actually will happen is paid family leave will be on the agenda. Now, paid family leave could be done in a way that is not anti-business. You could provide government incentives, specifically some kind of tax credits or some kind of carrot to get businesses to adopt paid family leave.
On their own.
The plans that we've seen in Santa Fe and that have been rejected in Santa Fe have been much more of a stick, hitting businesses and saying, you have to provide this benefit or we're going to come after you. Based on the makeup of the legislature, I expect that they will go back to the stick approach when it comes to this paid family leave issue. Tax reform, tax reduction, taxes always are an issue. There's talk of raising the alcohol tax theoretically because we have so many problems with alcohol abuse, although really those are very limited and very small relating to certain populations. We do have a lot of alcohol abuse, but as a percentage of the population, even here in New Mexico, it is a small number. And the problem is you raise taxes on everybody and they have to foot the bill. What we should be doing is taking existing revenue from the alcohol taxes and using that for treatment and to help people.
I thought we were doing that.
We are, but not to the extent that we could be. And again, we have all this money flowing in. We could and should be doing that, not penalizing the people who want to have a beer or two after work or on the weekends.
More women than men are in the legislature for the first time. Women make up 53% of the New Mexico legislature, ranking it second in the nation, trailing Nevada, which has 60% women. That's a big change. So more women-centered policies, perhaps?
That's nice. I don't really have an issue with that one way or the other. It's the philosophical underpinning of the legislature that keeps me up at night and causes problems for me. You would think maybe women would be more interested in education policy and getting our nation's worst education system turned around. It would be great if that was a direct translation.
Family issues, family safety. I would think they'd be concerned about their kids going out in the streets or themselves.
Or enacting policies like crime, education, tax reform, economic reform that keep our kids in New Mexico, because we are an aging state. Now, we're an aging country and an aging world. People in first world countries are not having babies at the level that they need to replace the population. But in New Mexico, it's double and triple the problem, because we saw a lot of people leave our state during COVID, and we see young people fleeing to other states for better economic opportunities. That has not changed. There's nothing that's happening in Santa Fe to change that. And so, as a mother, as a father, I would be happy if my children had economic opportunities and they felt that they could stay in New Mexico and live their best life. But a lot of our kids, young people, are leaving.
And you see nothing in the legislature to encourage the kids to stay here for opportunities.
Well, you see free college, but then they take that taxpayer-funded college degree that we're paying for, and then they go out of state.
What about the situation with RVs and electric buses and electric vehicles here in the mandate?
That was never addressed in the legislature. That was a separate body called the Environmental Improvement Board, not elected, appointed by the governor, that passed that in November of 2023. Now,
the EV mandate?
The EV mandate.
Okay.
That will take effect in the summer of 2026.
4 years. No. What? Wait.
A year and a half.
2026? No, we're in 2025, so it's going to be
a year and a half. Yeah. Because
next summer.
Well, yeah,
Oh, a year and a half summer.
Right.
Yes, gotcha.
So,
wow.
They're
going to say I can't buy
that is 47% of vehicles sold. The problem, and I didn't know this even myself when this was all going to happen, I figured it's 43%, I'm sorry, 43% of vehicles sold will have to be electric vehicles. The problem is there is not a recreational vehicle. You say RV, recreational vehicle is an RV. So the campers with the motors that you drive down the road, no one makes an electric RV. Because of that, you can't sell 43% of something that's not on the road, that's not made. So the RV industry put out an article saying, hey, these are the states, New Mexico being among them, that are going to essentially ban the sale of recreational vehicles. Now, the interesting thing is two things. One is this is happening in California as we speak. At the beginning of 2025, they are going to be in that boat where RVs are essentially unsellable in the state of California and a couple of other states. So we're going to see what their reaction is. Gavin Newsom seems to be thinking, well, I'm California, we can do whatever we want. Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. The preferred policy of Michelle Lujan Grisham is whatever California is doing. That's how we got this policy. Now, also, President Trump, coming into office, could eliminate a waiver that has allowed California to set its own standards for clean air or for these electric vehicles. So if Trump says that waiver is no longer something that we're going to allow, that kills the whole thing right there. So that could be another approach. Now, if you're Donald Trump, you sit there and say, well, California, New Mexico, Washington, Oregon, all these left-wing blue states that didn't vote for me, why do I want to save their bacon? I could just let them take their own medicine of their own bad policies. Yeah. I don't know how this is all going to pan out.
I thought you knew everything, Paul Gessing of the Rio Grande Foundation. So this is all new. I mean, you're a student of history.
Yeah.
Knowledge is important to you. You're a sponge that soaks it all in. So this is all new and different for you.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you might have a good grasp on historical context, but history, as they say, it doesn't repeat. I always say it rhymes. It rhymes. There are historical trends that occur. This all came out of when Southern California had real air issues, when the smog was horrible and it was killing people. And then I watched the game shows, The Price is Right, and all the other shows, and they always said, and California emissions. Well, that's because California had a special waiver to address their smog issues from the federal government. Now, it's a long way from enhanced emissions on a gas vehicle to banning internal combustion engines in your state, which California is going to do in the not too distant future. Their policies are in place.
So we're just going to see what happens, because
So
ours
we'll
is
see
going
what
to happen
happens.
in a year and a half.
Yes. So ours will happen.
The car dealers don't have cars to sell,
Well,
nor do we
people
have
in-
place to electrify them up,
People
gas
in-
them up.
Yeah, you'll probably see some more efforts to subsidize electric vehicles, charging stations,
Oh, there is
and the
many.
like, because that's all so-called free money. They don't feel like they're accountable for the money they spend in
It's
Santa
our
Fe.
money. It's mine. I'm paying my taxes.
I
You're
agree.
paying yours, and we're doing it now.
And we hold those people accountable, but we need you, the listener and viewer, to do the same.
What a treat. Thank you. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to come to KCHF TV studios and share your wisdom and thoughts. And when's the next election? When's the next election?
Well, we got City of Albuquerque and some local elections in November of 2025. So, no, well, mostly November. They've all gone to
Okay.
November schedule. So we'll be electing a
And
new
then a
mayor
new
in
governor
Albuquerque
in a
and new
year
city
and a half.
council
Okay.
in 2025. Yeah.
Paul Gessing, thank you so much. And Happy New Year again to you and your family, and a good, blessed year for all of us. Thanks for watching. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Make it a great week with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program, email us at info@kchftv.org or call us at 505-345-1991. Join us again for Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.